to take a couple of minutes to say a couple of things before I introduce my colleague Malavika. So first of all, hello. It's great for me to get the chance to address you all as we near the end of 3 packed days of talks that I hope you found useful and inspiring. Huge thanks to everyone who has helped to make this conference happen, and you'll see the list of who those people are on the slides that are going past between sessions. I want to take a moment especially to thank our sponsors, because you see their logos on our website, you see their logos on the slides, but really, we do need sponsorship and support, and we are hugely grateful, and it enables us to make this conference what it is and to enable as wide participation as possible. I think my camera may have gone off, but I'll carry on speaking. So I'm delighted to take this opportunity to introduce my colleague Malavika for this next feedback session. OASPA has held 4 workshops this year, digging into many aspects of open access equity. And Malavika is going to update us on the findings, and she'll also be asking for your input. So please be ready for that. And just before I hand over, I want to just a reflection on the conference as a whole from me. So we chose not to have an overall theme or title this year, but I think you may agree that every session really has been infused with or directly has addressed equity in open access publishing. And though we hear the word equity more and more, that in many contexts, I feel like I'm hearing the word more and more in many contexts. And I suppose for us in this scholarly communications world, what we could summarize it as is that it's not what you do, but it's the way that you do it. And thinking inclusively can be challenging, and it definitely highlights gaps and needs for ongoing improvement. For me personally, if I just take the small example of timetabling this conference, where we must accommodate speaker time zones and we want to accommodate as many participant time zones as possible, it forces me to think beyond the easiest or most convenient path, and yet still there are gaps and we don't accommodate everyone. And that's just timetabling a conference. That's not anything on the scale of transforming a publishing operation or starting a new publisher or publication equitably. So I think the lesson here is that we have to consciously center inclusivity and equity in everything we do. And that's a vital and ongoing practice if we genuinely care about making things better. And with that, I will hand over to Malavika. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bernie. I hope everyone can hear me all right. And no doubt Ruby or somebody from the team will tell me if I'm not coming through okay. I am delighted to be here with you. It's the last session on the last day. I know you've done a lot of Zooming, so I don't at all take your attendance and your time here for granted. Thank you so much for being here. And I am just going to bring up my slides, but while I do that, you know, you've been on Zoom a long time. Give yourselves the permission to stand up and move around as you listen to me. You know, it's a sort of a simple thing to say to do, but we forget to move. People who know me know that I like to move. Sometimes I walk and talk. I'm not doing that right now, but I was stood up for the entirety of the last session, which was a cracker of a panel session. So, you know, stretch, give your self-care. Bernie talked very eloquently about, you know, equity and how do you do that? And I'd say, well, do start with yourself and treat yourself with the respect you need. So, you know, if you need a stretch, if you need to listen to me on your feet, do that. Welcome, as I said. And before I get into equity in open access, I want to just start by looking at the word equity first. And again, hopefully you can see my slides, otherwise no doubt somebody will tell me. But looking at the word equity first, I wanted to start there because equity as a word, I think, packs quite a punch, right? It goes further than equality. So it's not about providing an equal footing for all. No, it goes beyond this to actually address issues of cumulative advantage. Okay, equity also includes the principle of inclusivity, so a way for all to be included. And finally, equity assures diversity, because where the environment is equitable, in that environment, a diversity of inputs, of formats, of languages, of peoples, of approaches, business models will all automatically follow. But you can't have that diversity without the playing field being equitable in the first instance, right? So this year, as Bernie said, OASPA has been running a series of multi-stakeholder workshops to look at how we can deliver open access more equitably. And I'm here to tell you a bit more about this and then get your feedback on what OASPA could do next. Now, hopefully the slide is transitioning okay. As OASPA sees it, there are two aspects to increasing equity and open access. The first is who can do, right? Equity and access. Who can publish open access? The other facet, as we see it, is equity and engagement. And this is about who has a say. So we need to enable equity in who has decision-making powers in editorial selection, in peer review, as we were hearing about in the last panel, in publishing content itself. Who has the influence? In fact, who is at the table in establishing what quality even is? Right? So who has a voice in not just the publishing process, but also its governance and its evolution in this changing world? Now, when you look across both these facets, it's a really wide scope, and OASPA needed to start somewhere. Okay, so we started with the data we already have about our members. And OASPA brought up a little statistic there on the slide. OASPA is growing concerned by a lack of diversity in the way open access for the publisher version of the article is being achieved right now. There is this overwhelming dominance of the APC and the pay-to-publish approach. And it's no surprise with the level of consolidation in this route to, this pay-to-publish reinforced route to open access. It's no surprise that APCs and OA, for instance, are being conflated. It's sad, but it's not surprising. And along with this consolidation, there's also mounting evidence of the exclusionary nature of a lot of the publishing taking place today. And I brought up a list of references there on the slide, and distilling these down, the pay-to-publish system, and I should clarify that in this, I include both APCs as well as pure publish agreements, OA agreements, transformative agreements, read and publish, all of these approaches together, I'm lumping into a pay-to-publish approach. And this way of doing open access is only opening the door to open access publishing for select authors at select institutions. Right? So we're seeing that this approach is disadvantageous really to most scholars in the world. How is that? Well, basically, it's the pay-to-publish route is leaving out scholars who are more junior in their careers, wherever they are in the world, scholars who are women, wherever they are in the world, practitioners, professionals, retired scholars, those outside of academia. You can think of technicians, engineers, clinicians, designers, those in the private sector, those at NGOs or charities or government bodies. And coming back to academia, the pay-to-publish route is leaving out, and some of these references will even tell you it is silencing scholars who are in low-income countries, scholars who are in middle-income countries. So what it looks like is that pay-to-publish is only working really well for male scholars who are at a senior stage of professional rank, affiliated with well-resourced institutions in high-income countries. And open access done in this way, then, is leaving out the majority of the world's scholars. So in 2023, under the guidance of our Equity and OA Working Group, OASPA focused on bringing stakeholders together to discuss how we can increase equity in access to open access publishing. And we've had 4 workshops bringing together stakeholders from across 32 countries. We worked with external partners information power on these 4 workshops, so that we had a neutral party, independent of OASPA, running the workshops, facilitating the conversations, and writing up the formal workshop reports. And this format has really allowed OASPA to listen, to digest and reflect on everything we were hearing in the workshop conversations. We owe really big thanks to not just OASPA's Equity in OA Working Group, but also to Alicia and Lorraine from Information Power. And we also owe big thanks to everyone all over the world who gave up their time and shared their thoughts with us, right? Across all 4 workshops, we had quite honest and open and constructive discussions, and we were keen for these workshops to bring primarily libraries and publishing organizations together. And we wanted a real variety in terms of size and type of organization represented, but also variety in the way that open access was being achieved, right? And a range of perspectives from that way of thinking as well. So I hope this slide here kind of illustrates some of this variety. But besides libraries and publishers, we also wanted to include other stakeholders that we thought were quite important to have as part of these discussions. So you can see those other stakeholders there at the bottom of the slide. And these are the sorts of things we asked our workshop participants to work on. You can see the shape of the discussion across the series. And I should say that each workshop really informed where we would go next and the agenda and the focus of subsequent workshops. And I should also at this point mention that issues of prestige and perceptions and misconceptions in OA publishing, and the issue really of credibility of open access content did come up quite consistently throughout the series. So we also structured some of the discussion around these issues. And before I share with you what we learned, I wanted to share in a more direct way what we heard. Right? So these are a selection of quotes from across all 4 workshops, and I'll just give you a second to absorb what's there on the slide. Okay. And hopefully you've had a moment to look at that. And moving on then to what we did learn, the conversations from our Equity and OA workshops suggested first that it is time to rethink both how and if APCs and BPCs should be used in scholarly publishing. Making some changes to the pay-to-publish system here and now was really agreed to be important. Workshop participants felt that clear guidelines and recommendations in fostering equity are needed, and thinking specifically for a moment about APCs, eligibility criteria for waivers or discounts, how this is communicated, and minimizing burdens for researchers, including via automations, came out as top areas for OASPA to consider in any development around possible principles of practice. There was strong consensus that stopping after we make incremental changes to the APC waiver system was really not enough. We heard loud and clear in our workshops that APCs at scale, running as they are, cannot ever be equitable. So it was judged to be important to focus on other approaches that deliver on open access for all. A clear majority of workshop participants felt that no researcher facing fees to read or to publish, as the slide tells you, is essential for global equity. And to achieve this, we heard that we need funding models that are completely decoupled from an atomized approach to individual articles. Now, we learned these things, but we learned some other things as well, right? We learned that open access is not always seen as trustworthy or desirable. There are perceptions that content is inherently less or maybe even unvaluable because it is open access. And we feel this is something that does need to be tackled. And editorial integrity and notions of prestige and research culture and research assessment, of course, these are all interconnected issues, as Danny was explaining yesterday and we heard in a panel this afternoon. But in the context of integrity and culture and trust, our workshops highlighted how transparency in publishing needs to be thought about not just as good practice, but also in the context of trust signals that need to be evident to payers or potential payers in this quest to support more equitable open access models. So there are many things that OASPA could do next, and in no particular order, there are 6 things we propose OASPA could do, right? We could set up some new norms and sculpt some principles of practice particularly to alleviate payment and waiver-related pain points in the APC system. We could amplify where and how equitable OA is being achieved. And the conclusion, I think, from the panel yesterday that Lucy Vance moderated was we could have a whole conference on the topic of open access without fees to read or publish, right? So the idea here is that maybe OASPA could help spotlight what is happening and inspire new thinking, provide practical input, and help publishing organizations navigate to find their own way towards more equitable OA, being inspired by what's already taking place. Next idea, we could use more detailed member data and develop a baseline for the reach of open access publishing. And looking at diversity as a marker for equity, we could look at over time, are we getting better? Are we increasing and broadening access to open access publishing? Next idea, maybe we could or should engage directly with researchers and engage more with librarians. And I should say that engaging with researchers would very much be new realms for OASPA, and we would have to do this collaboratively. But maybe this is an area that we need to wade into, perhaps. A next idea is for OASPA maybe to function as a clearinghouse or a matching up function, right? In introducing vetted, trustworthy OA publishing services that don't charge any researcher-facing fees, matching them up with potential funding sources. Now, we know that some organizations exist in the infrastructure space around this. We heard yesterday about the OACIP, and Charla from Lyrasis was saying we needed a broader and more global network, federated system, and perhaps drawing on OASPA's role as vetting and kite marking and convening. These are strengths of OASPA's. Perhaps we have a place to help in this realm, perhaps. Finally, perhaps OASPA could create a special interest group for publishers and others achieving open access without APCs. This would be a dedicated channel for collaboration for those already achieving open access in this way, right? And we heard from Caroline of the Open Library of Humanities. She closed out her talk yesterday she closed that out with one of her questions being, can we get smarter? Can we collaborate? We don't have massive sales and marketing teams. So, does OASPA have a role here to help such publishers convene and collaborate? And maybe this group could also face those publishers intending to shift away from APCs, perhaps. So these are 6 things we think we could do. Right. And I'm hoping that none of the activity proposed here is puzzling in any way, because we've been very openly sharing OASPA's reflections as we've progressed through this workshop series. I've listed on this slides our own reflections and our blogs arising from each workshop. And in case you've looked at any of these, then firstly, thanks a lot for reading and engaging in that way. And second, you should know that my big thanks are owed to Alicia and Lorraine from Information Power again, and also to Claire Redhead, my boss, and to Bernie, my dear colleague from OASPA, for very expert and careful pre-publication review before we released these blogs, right? Now, on the last slide, I summarized and distilled down 6 things OASPA could do next. And we'd really like your inputs on these suggestions. So I would now like to ask Lachlan to come in, or somebody from the events team to put to us the first Zoom poll that we have. Right. So first question, and you can look at the little box in Zoom. You can move that box to where you want. But the first question is really asking you to rank in what order we should proceed on this path. Now, can I just say here, to be very clear, I'm here asking you to make an assumption that all these suggestions are good ones. I have a separate question where you can tell OASPA if you think that we should avoid something, and you can give us some feedback if you don't want us to do something. But taking these 6 things as valuable for the moment, can you put them in order of what you think is most helpful first, next, most helpful next, and so on? If there's something you really hate, put it last for now. Like I say, there'll be another question where you can tell us more about that. But Lachlan, can I get a read from you of whether we're getting some answers in? Because I've had to dismiss the poll myself, so I can keep talking through the question. If you wanted to, if we've got some rankings that have come through, do you want to bring that up on screen? Largely, this session is for us to consolidate and take back this feedback and take it away and feed this up to the equity in OA working group that meets early next month. So, you know, we want to bank this, but I just want to make sure, Lachlan, that that people are able to engage on the Zoom poll and that we are getting some feedback through.
Hi, Malavika. We've got about 36% of people have responded. So I'm just going to leave it open a little longer so that we can get some more responses.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And just to clarify, right, the ideas are, hopefully you can see it on the Zoom poll, but the ideas are recommended practice, recommended principles of practice for more equitable OA, details of models achieving more equitable OA, measuring and monitoring diversity in open access publishing, perhaps a symposium or a series of symposia for librarians and researchers, OASPA serving as maybe an introduction service, clearinghouse function to match up vetted OA publishing with potential sources of funding, and finally, a new OASPA special interest group for non-APC OA publishing, right? Those were your options. Hopefully, you have been able to, is there anything in chat? Sorry, I haven't looked at chat at all, but hopefully if people aren't able to use the Zoom, then you're telling us in chat, and the events team are, Events Hub team are noting this. But otherwise, in the absence of anybody screaming, maybe I shall just proceed to the next question, which is the next Zoom poll. Lachlan, if you are ready to bring that up, this is about what we are missing, right? So what one thing that is something you think is really important that you haven't heard so far, okay? And in this, obviously, you're thinking, what thing is missing that OASPA should do in order to increase equity in access to open access publishing? Now, on this, I should say we have a whole separate question on who we should collaborate with. So if you have ideas about that, hold those thoughts. Okay, hold on to that. We want to capture that in a separate question. For now, if you can just focus on anything, any activity that you think is missing in the 6 things that we have proposed that we might do next. Okay. So I will give you a moment. Lachlan, hopefully some answers are flying in. But yeah, tell us what we've not considered. I mean, this is really a fabulous opportunity for me personally and for OASPA to get a wide wide set of inputs. And I should at this point say something I didn't say when I was presenting in the Zoom format, in the workshop format. We were really limited by the logistics of Zoom and having roughly 30 people, roughly 30-ish people per Zoom room, only for the ability to hold good discussion within one Zoom room, right? And that's why we use the blog format to really solicit much wider comment and inputs from the community. And this polling exercise is kind of an extension of that, right? Whether you were in these workshops or not, we would like to hear from you. So, Lachlan, do you think we've got a reasonable amount on things that we might have been missing?
So we're up to 30% of people have responded. So we can go ahead.
A third of people. Okay, maybe I have to be content with that. Right, so we can move on to our next question, which is about what we should avoid. Okay, so please tell us what one thing you think we should be sure to steer clear of, right? And I guess what we're trying to get at here is your thoughts about, hey, this is great, but make sure you don't. What is that thing, right? It could be one of the 6 things you've already heard about where you think there's something really problematic, or it could be something totally else, right? Oh, you're going down this path. Beware of. Make sure you steer clear of. That's what we're trying to get out of this. There is, I believe, a character limit. So I think it's 120 characters. Hopefully that gives you enough to just pinpoint something. And I will, at the end of the presentation, be sharing my own email address. So if this poll system has not given you enough space to give us your thoughts, please do write directly to me. I promise you, I will pick up the email. I'll be excited to hear directly from you. So tell us one thing you think we should make sure we avoid doing. Lachlan, how are we faring on this one?
Almost at 15%, so we might just leave it open a little longer.
Okay, well, let's leave it open a bit longer. I wonder, Lachlan, if we bring up the results, if we can see them, I hope that doesn't crash the whole presentation for when I come back to it, but is that something we can do? And maybe that might encourage some more sharing.
So we'd have to close the poll before we can look at the results.
Oh, fair.
Look at the results
Okay.
once they've come in. We're almost at 30% again, so that'd be a...
Oh, look at that. Okay. Maybe that was a trickier question, hey? What should we avoid doing? But yeah, we thought it might be worth asking that in the mix. Okay, so finally, this is the last question. Okay, basically, we know that we don't operate in silos. Okay, and OASPA works very collaboratively with a range of stakeholders. Now, specifically in the context of equity in OA, we've heard through the workshop series that we could work with all of the organizations that are up on the slide. Okay, so hopefully you can see my slide still. I've brought up a list of organizations on the bottom left of the slide. Who else do you think we should work with? And tell us 2 organizations. We didn't want to restrict you to one. And here I've said not publishers. And I don't want anybody to be offended by that. But basically, publishing organizations are a primary stakeholder group of OASPAs, right? We know the community, we know our members, we have a way to reach you. And of course, we will be collaborating with our publishing organizations. This is really us trying to get those unknowns. Who have we not heard of, right? Or who did we not think of, even if we've heard of them? So who should we be collaborating with as we move forward to try and increase equity in open access? Lachlan, how are we doing on this one?
A bit slower again with this one. We're almost at 15%.
That's fine. Okay, I can give some more time to this. That's not a problem. And I should say that building stronger links with groups like DORA and COARA really came out strongly in the workshops, because we realized that, well, COARA, for instance, OASPA, as far as I understand it, cannot sign up ourselves to COARA, but we can support its work and you know, looking at the whole reform of research evaluation. It's such a huge area, and so we felt it's important for us to not stay standing still or silent on it. So let's support in the way we can. This was one of the recommendations also coming out of the OA market work, which right at the start of the conference at day 1, Claire referenced that work and talked to you already about how this equity in OA project actually emerges from and comes out of that foundational OA market work that OASPA did. So yes, that's where the DORA COARA links were suggested through the workshop series. We also heard about OA 2020, who have been running their own equity in OA workshop series for research producers and libraries and funders. We also know about the JISC, PLOS, Plan S multi-stakeholder group, which will be looking at a move away from APCs. So, you know, we want to work collaboratively. B, we don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? But we want to help effectively where we can. So who should we be working with? How are those answers looking now, Lachlan?
We are now at 35% and they seem to have stopped coming in. So we'll just end it there.
Okay, great. Thank you so much to everybody who has given us some input. And speaking of what we are missing, right, I will come back to the fact that we have only focused on financial exclusion in current models of open access, right? We've not tackled the fact that equity in engagement is needed. Equity is needed to increase diversity in who is editing or reviewing or publishing or setting the benchmarks for quality. We need increased diversity in types and formats, outputs, language, not just the narrative essay style of reporting. So, you know, we're quite aware that there's lots more to be done, but this is just the feedback report and a chance for us to get some inputs from you based on where we are for the moment. And really, I should say huge thanks on behalf of Claire, Bernie, the whole OASPA team. We're really, really grateful for your time, for your participation, for your inputs today, which no doubt we will give you a view of. And there's my email address on the slide as well. So if we have not given you enough space for your thoughts and feedback today in this format, do please feel free to email me. And if we have some time, then I hope I've left enough time. I'm very happy to take some questions. And maybe I shall stop sharing my screen so that I can also move into, I don't know if anything has come through on Q&A. Right. Okay. So I have looked in the Q&A box and I see a great question about actually research assessment system and fixing problems with scholarly publishing and you know, focusing in those areas and individuals advocating for change, such as Lizzie Gadd. And that's where really that's where the thinking around, well, should OASPA do more with DORA, with COARA, that's where that came from, because, you know, there's this wider shift that's needed while we are taking perhaps a narrower view of access to open access publishing. We're really cognizant of this wider change that needs to happen, which is why DORA, COARA, research evaluation reform is on our agenda, and why we wanted to hear from you about, you know, who else might we need to be working with to advocate for change, because OASPA is already in that space and wants to collaborate in that space. And hopefully this question came up from an anonymous attendee. Hopefully I've answered your question, but if not, please, or if you wanted something more or something more specific that I haven't quite gotten to, then please do type in chat or let me know.